Thank you so much for coming to join us for this task seminar. And we're delighted to have Mamood Ahmad here with us. Mamood's an independent therapist, author, trainer, and founder of the Anti-Discrimination Focus, with lots of experience in mental health advocacy work. And I think for me, where I really came to kind of recognize Mamood's contribution is with his new book, the New Introduction to Counseling and Psychotherapy. And I think what's so exciting about that is one of the first texts that really embeds issues of context, diversity, and equity, EDI, into practice, which I think is so needed. And certainly from a task perspective, we're so keen to see for students and people coming into the profession that EDI isn't just a kind of add-on that you learn at the end of your course or have a hour session on, but actually is fundamentally integrated right from the very beginning into training. And I think a kind of counselling introduction book that does that is fantastic. So, Mahmood, wonderful to have you here. And
Brilliant.
so, if you want to take about 50 minutes or so, and then that'll give us some time for discussion, and then we'll have a little break, and then we'll have some more discussion after that.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mick, and welcome everyone to the space. I want to thank people who've organised it and all the bit that goes into getting people here and enrolling and all that stuff. Great to see everyone. I was talking to John and Mick before. I was thinking to myself, no, I was going to turn up for this. Not on a Friday at 5 o'clock. We've got better things to do. But it's really glad to see people here turning up in numbers as well. Really appreciate that. So I'll do the 50 minutes as Mick suggests. And it's nice to get the conversations going and get the feedback as well. I appreciate that because it helps me as well to know I'm on the right track. So please do use the text box as we're going along to reflect on what I'm saying, to ask any questions so we can come back to it at the end. Um, and take it from there. So I'm really going to start by saying, really, where do I start? Maybe a bit dramatically, I'll start today. What if I said, with one simple change that I'm going to tell you about today, you can make the profession stronger, healthy, and equitable? And that change wouldn't cost you much. That change would be simple. But obviously, you'd have to action it. It wouldn't cost you anything to do. And that change would be a mandatory prerequisite for social change in a sustainable, long-term way. So that's the call here for this presentation. And would you believe me if I said that it was that simple? And would you be convinced if I convinced you, would you actually action that today, or would it be forgotten about? So that's the statement I was starting off with. That I could tell you the answer actually in 1 minute, but we're going to take 50 minutes to do it. Makes it a bit more interesting, the edges around it. Okay, so that's my starting point, that it is a prerequisite for social change. We can't sustain it without this. Psychology, therapy, helping is the relationship, and so on. Um, we need to action that in that. And really going to show you why it's really important to do that. Okay, so I'm going to present now, and I'm going to present end to end. I don't really like presenting end to end because it's, I mean, that sort of area people will lose attention maybe. But anyway, I'll do that. So welcome to the presentation, embedding context, diversity, and EDI into the curriculum practice in what I call relationship two. All the slides, all the images and resources are available for free to use. They're all under Creative Commons license. There's no permission required. And you don't need any permission to use these slides to present yourself to other people either. So that's a key point. And there's a link there, and I think the team will put that into the text box as well. So the wholeness solution is going to be described in 5 easy steps. The first step is the most important and perhaps the only one that's required. But anyway, So the wholeness solution is like a little drop in the ocean, but it has a huge impact going forward for the profession in terms of its consciousness of itself and in terms of consciousness of social change. It's right in the depth of it needs to be embedded right into the bowels of the profession. And without it, we cannot sustain, I believe, social change. We can't sustain relationships. We can't sustain a healthier profession, a stronger, equitable profession at all. So the drop in the ocean leads us to collective growth and repair. It changes the professional culture in a way that's healthy, and we can accept differences. It's fine. And importantly, it's accessible. Access is available, and accessibility is available to everyone, regardless of their mind-body differences and backgrounds. Professional health is what we can contribute to social change, what we can contribute to the world and the planet. And I do agree, as per the task um, uh, blurb around what its aims are, that we have a really critical message and important role in the wider international world change order. A really important one if we can get it right. So the structure of this presentation is I'll go through why we need this. Hopefully that will be a bit easier to understand for most, but I'm still going to go through it. I'll be describing the 1 to 5 solution for this change and why it's important. And at the end, hopefully the last 10, 15 minutes, we can all take away and see what we want to do individually. This is not a problem statement. This is an action statement. So my pitch will be quite salesy in that sense. So it might be quite different to a standardized CPD or a lecture because it's about action. The wholeness solution is all about advocacy and action. It's not about it's not just about discussing particular clients or particular client work. It's about the whole thing around it, strategy. Okay, so thanks for mentioning the book. The book is the new helping baseline. It's below the level of theory. I've tried to make it. There may be adaptations required for it, 4 different theories, but it covers the model and how it's implemented from a self-development, theory, relationship, skills, practice perspective. Even the organization of practice is covered in the book. So it's a model for the change that we desire into the basic helping curriculum, into the basic relationship, into the basic diploma, and it's the beginning point of everything else that comes around. So to understand the solution and perhaps why it's so simple is to understand the current landscape of our profession and where we've come from so that we can understand what the solution needs to be. So this is probably easy, understandable stuff. We have originated historically over 50 years ago from 3 primary schools of theory from which we are forming our mainstream knowledge from. That is humanistic existential, that is cognitive behavioral, that is psychoanalytic and psychodynamic. And therefore, those, as we probably already know, those tend to locate issues intrapsychically inside the person rather than thinking about the context as much. And the issue with that is that it becomes a centralized dominant knowledge base. It replicates into further subjects. When we talk about grief or substance abuse or eating disorders, it then follows that basic pattern into the knowledge itself and into the culture of talking about relationships and structures and CPDs and so on. So that issue has been addressed. It has been addressed through secondary, which I position as secondary knowledge, which is more contextual knowledge. Um, so we're talking about cultural competency, we're talking about identity, we're talking about potentially social justice, we're talking about neurodiversity and so on. And that's the problem. This is the problem statement of the current architecture of helping. We see these as secondary, as separate subjects. we are separating them out, and that causes the problems because when we end up replicating that separation to subjects as well. So, for example, we may talk about couples counseling across cultures as a separate subject to the mainstream. That division causes the issue of fragmentation, separation, and segregation. And furthermore, it replicates into the culture of the profession and the structures of the professions where we see we're actually working with people B. There's no such thing as people B, as I'm sure you'll accept. There's people. And the current setup seems to be about these are other people we treat in a different way through secondary knowledge and practices and so on. So this creates the barrier at the level of knowledge and practice. And because we see these as add-ons, and we've addressed them as add-ons, but the problem with add-ons, they fragment, they are invisible, sometimes excluded, and therefore it continues to perpetuates the model of people A and people B and different ideas about the self from the mainstream knowledge that we have on the left-hand side. So it then creates the idea that concepts from the secondary practice don't embed into the mainstream practice, including knowledge and lived experiences. So we'll have to hold on to that knowledge and lived experiences until we come to the secondary subjects. A classic example is we talk about gender as a separate subject, and we don't include that when we're talking about another subject in the mainstream, like grief or theory and so on, or etc. So that's the problem here is the perpetuation of segregation through that baseline model that creates the problem. So this is the shopping list I had for embedded practice that we need to address these things so that they aren't separated as add-ons. That was the big challenge. It's a big shopping list, as you can probably appreciate from that. But also to point out that it isn't just about what we normally call diversity or culture. It's also about some missing things like the body and trauma and stress, linguistics and language as well, and of course accessibility and EDI. So therefore, this is an opportunity to soup up some of the additional fragmentation into the whole. So what is that new architecture look like? In essence, this is saying that we need to bring in the contextualized ideas and experiences into the mainstream primary practices. And over time, that we have a new model. So that basic helping model, and we don't even have to talk about it in circles of psychology either. It can be just the relationship in general in life. Um, that model needs to be uplifted or augmented a little bit without changing it fundamentally. So the architecture is that we need a stronger foundational model from which we need to then base different modalities, helping professions and subjects on, rather than trying to fix every single modality or every single subject in itself. So the baseline of helping, that ego and helping model of the client therapist, that is actually what needs to be augmented and made explicit, as I'll talk about. So the wholeness solution isn't simply a model. It's based on the model and but it's an advocacy framework, and it's a set of artifacts and ideas and a model as architected in the book. It includes a transition plan for training providers. It's a scope mapped curriculum. It's a systematic method, and that's important here. The model gives us a method for embedding so that we can assess knowledge, we can assess what we're doing, so we're not actually neglecting or fragmenting a certain aspect in what we teach, so that actually it can be part and parcel of it rather than separated out as a separate thing. And importantly, it's a teaching pedagogical approach which we have out there at the moment, ways of teaching that are very simple. So not only is the model what the change I'm asking for going to be very simple, the teaching model itself within the course is very simple as well, which I'll talk about. So far, within the 3, 4 months we've had the book, we've had quite a number of lecturers adopting it, a number of organizations adopting the model and starting to use it in practice. Some of them are here today. I can see a few faces, that's great. Organizations are using it as a standard now, including a creation of new courses. So this is good news in the short period of time we've got it, had it out there for. But I'm not underestimating the size of the work that needs to be done and the possibility that there will be pushback against it as well. So I'm not naive to that either. We've had a good engagement so far with the standards bodies. Most of what we've covered, including BACP, ACC, and CPS trainers, CPCAB, and so on. We've had good take up, and I think people have recognised it as a sort of thing they need to learn about. But it is going to be proof in the pudding, as they say. I just wanted to highlight before I continue, there's a new document out which I was mentioned here, which is a 25-point self-guidance for organizations that do training, provide training, to self-assess how embedded their training is with regard to context, identity, and EDI. It's in the resources link. So the 5 steps I'll go through now, and there is only one step. As I said, there was 5 in theory, and but in practice, actually, there was only one step to change. But we have to do it all together. The issue, as it is this: we need to understand if we're talking about embedding practice, embedding theory, or embedding context into theory's practice or the relationship, we have to understand what we are as a profession already embedding. This is what we're already embedding. We're embedding the idea of a person having experiences in a psychic, interpersonal, over time, and then we overlay theory on top of that. Okay. So this is the current embedded approach. And this is the problem because by making the context and the secondary ideas invisible in this model, it creates the gaps in fuller understanding of experience. The exclusion comes through the invisibility of those gaps. And that replicates into culture, other CPDs, and so on. So it continues that reinforces the model and the otherness of other knowledge when actually there's a simple solution to it. It constricts, if a student sees that on day one or implies that on day one, it constricts the whole population representation, their lived experiences, their voice, knowledge, the barriers. It restricts empathy to the contextual social side. It restricts accessibility awareness, EDI awareness. It restricts the barriers and opportunities and needs individual students, and we all have in the experience of anything, whether it's on training, whether it's on therapy, whatever it is in life. So that is the problem. Fragments understanding of the self, the context, and the meanings to later stage adaptations and later add-ons. Even if we did a better job of including some of those secondary areas throughout the curriculum in different areas, it still wouldn't be embedded because it would still be an add-on. Okay, so what do we do with that? So I really want to take time to reflect here why the answer is so simple, because that's what we've embedded so far. So I'm just saying as a collective, as a culture, we've embedded this. But the good news, as I said, this is why it's so simple, is that the secondary add-ons are universal and formative of the self. Because remember what we said? We said that these are reactions to the missing pieces within the mainstream knowledge and the theories. That's why they exist. If they didn't, if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't need to exist. So a key thing for my thinking about what the solution would be actually to say, actually, these are all in harmony. There is no disagreement, there's no conflict. They are simply pieces of the puzzle. And that puzzle is in describing who we are as universal humans in the world. So the answer is therefore avoid fragmentation. So how do we do that? Simple. So now in this new model, it's the same model of experiencing. It's not changed as such. But what it's done is it's made explicit the context in a very generic framework. Okay. So all this is saying, as you probably hopefully intuitively guess, is that the inner experience of inner and interpersonal is formed through our worldviews, our identities, and personal identities, the context of our environment and culture and society, our knowledge, and this is an important bit that is missing. We bring knowledge to the experience, whether it's embodied knowledge, propagated, whatever that knowledge is, we're bringing that into the experience, lived experiences we're bringing in. Then we have embodiment. We bring a mind body into the experience through feelings, through patterns, through our executive function, communication styles, relational attachment, that all those things are part of the embodiment. And that's been a big part that's been missing because we've always thought of the body as separate. And it's very easy to forget about the body as well. For example, in training, we might forget about the body, but we might actually go back to the model and say, what about the body in this? What about the neurodiversity and so on? And time. Time is not only lifespan time, it's the collective intergenerational time, it's the DNA over time as well, and our heritages that we have that are formative of our experience today. It's important, I think, personally, it's individual belief systems, and this allows for that, by the way, is that my existence here is not just ahistorical, it's within time, and everything that's from behind is actually part and parcel of my experience as well. And I think we're agreeing more and more with that. Oh, sorry about that. There's a bit of a mistake. Okay, so strengthens the gaps. This is important to understand. This is a full model. It doesn't miss anything out. It encapsulates the whole. That's why it's called the wholeness solution. So it strengthens the gap, represents it, and it becomes our positionality. So it's more formal in terms of this is our positionality we're bringing to the experience, our knowledge, we're bringing that in, for example. It's inclusive by visibility. A student seeing that will see, oh, my identity, my differences of body and time, my knowledge, and so on. So they will be able to see that, and the tutor will then model that with the students to say, actually, this is how we can differ in our lived experiences. So it's welcoming in that sense. So it welcomes the representation, it welcomes the contextual empathy, as I would call it in the book. The knowledge needs and barriers can come up. So this is what makes the whole solution is based on this. That's why I'm saying it's simple. But the secondary part of it is mandatory. This is not optional. That's the statement I'm making, is that we can't if you're not doing this or something like it, we're always going to be exclusionary. Either your training course is going to be exclusionary, it's risk being exclusionary, or later on with clients it's going to be exclusionary, or your organization is going to be exclusionary in some way because we're not considering the whole. Because that's why I said it just takes a minute to describe the solution because it is that simple. So then we can add a few extra layers on top of that top level diagram. There is a lower level diagram to this as well. There's 2 levels lower, but this is all that's needed from a tutoring perspective with students. So we add the EDI bit. We add the fact that all these contexts in your experience can have normative parts to them and different parts to them. And all of your experiences, you might face opportunities and you might face barriers, including accessibility and exclusion. So far, we've had a number of case studies. Some people were from here as well, Kaspari organization, they also, and the list I mentioned before. But these are some of the ways this model is actually being used in teaching. You take the model, you you help you model that exploration of lived experience from day one. It's not day two exercise, and start bringing in these ideas about belief systems, religion, whatever student brings in, it's their experience, so that they can discuss how and already embed that model from day one. If it's at the end of the course, it's too late. It has to be day one or day two. Okay, so some examples of there in tutoring, in the way we teach already. And this was one that talked about, there's this whole wheel, like spin the wheel. That's just an idea of spinning the wheel and talking about particular areas. Another example of tutoring and that. Okay, so the teaching method is very simple. Day one, use yourself as a self-reference point with the model, embed it into yourself as a continuous process, have it on the board, have it in the handouts as a continuous recognition that all our subjects are within this context, the self was in this context. And then when people come out of the training, they are practice ready because they're aware of the social context, they're aware of EDI, they are aware of barriers and opportunities and the potential for them to adjust their practice with an EDI lens on as well, organizationally. There is a second level model. I just wanted to show that there's a lot of analysis that's gone on to describe the high level model, and there's a third level as well. So that's the the fundamentals of it. The rest becomes then easy. The rest of it's easy. So you could probably guess what I'm going to say here. The relationship that we embed at the moment is something like this. It talks about two people experiencing life and the relationship dynamics at a personal level between the therapist and the client. And there may be some articulation of power dynamics within that as well. And similarly to the self model, we need to uplift this model to be more explicit for us to be able to do context embedded, social context, personal context, and EDI embedded into the relationship in the bowels of knowledge and theory and relationship. It doesn't explicitly make those things visible in the relationship, limited scope, where's the class, where's the belief system, dynamics in the relationship, and needs to be explored as well. Individual empathy may be inadequate, shallow, and harmful without embedding the context. Imagine if the relevance of your neurodivergence or your belief system was so relevant to the relationship and exploration, and that was missing, or the language was misattuned because of it. That is harmful. So the model is actually risks harm. So there is something about the relationship that actually we've missed fundamentally, even though we've done so much great work on it, is that when we look at through observation of the culture and the way we talk about relationships, we talk about secondary ideas as if they're separate to the relationship when they're not. When we talk about culture, your gender, your ethnicity, your whatever it is, your religion, your neurodiversity, these are the relationship. These aren't separate to the relationship. So, but we talk about it as if the secondary ideas are somehow separate to thinking about the relationship. That's the fragmentation issue. Second issue is that we tend to talk about the relationship as a whole, as one thing. However, in this, it's not one thing, it's multiplicity of relationships with ourselves, with others as well. Um, one question would be to say, how strong is your gender relationship between you and your friends or your client? And therefore, the relationship is not a singular thing, it's a multiplicity of relationships. So I think that's an error in terms of what we're trying to formulate here. Relationship is not knowledgeless. I think there's still an idea out there that we can build relationships without knowledge. We don't need to learn about language, you don't need to learn about particular communities, groups, autism, and we can do work. I'm sure we can do work, but I think it's very risky and potentially harmful. We don't have knowledge. So I just want to make sure we understand that knowledge is needed to build relationships. It's not knowledge less. Number four, relationships are always seen as interpersonal between two people at the personal level. They're not really considered as a contextual lens. So, in other words, what is our relationship with technology? What is our relationship with groups? What is our relationship with ancestors? What is our relationship with the government? What is our relationship with the Mental Health Institute? And so, another area of scope that's missing when we think about relationship is the interconnected relationships. And number four, an important part of why this model is true is that it's not just about a relationship, which it obviously is. It's about it gives you understanding of the client and where they're coming from. By having understanding, including the context as I've described, it leads to better attuned responses, whether we call those empathic responses, interventions, protocols, whatever we want to call that, or conceptualizations, it comes from understanding the client in their context. So therefore, I just want to make that point out. We can have a client feel connected in the relationship, but the understanding is what gives rise to good interventions. Therefore, I've coined this term relational scope in the book, which is about, yes, we can talk about relational depth, we can talk about relationships in general, but we also need to understand what the scope of that relationship, where is that relationship need to go, or where is it missing? So the way I describe it here in this diagram is to say a good enough relationship may not be a generic good enough relationship. The good enough relationship may be specific to one aspect of the client's world, their identity, or whatever those aspects of context were. Okay. So therefore, the relational model aims to complete that and fulfill this cover those gaps and areas. So therefore, the relationship is not only the personal, it's the contextual. So you could have a relationship between identity to identity, time to time, embodiment to embodiment, for example, at any level. Furthermore, the relationship is also influenced by this environment and sensory experiences, noise, and so on, as well as the layers of organization and so on. And the relationship is mediated by power and affinity, similarity, difference, and communication and meaning. In other words, do we understand each other? Is there a mismatch of understanding? There's more detail here, but I always want to quickly put that out. And the interconnected relationships are described in the model. We're talking about technology and so on. So you have that as well. So this is formulating a reference model for thinking about the relationship. It's not trying to dictate the theory. It's trying to say this is a truism. So relationship is key. It's mandatory for it. It welcomes the whole population into the relationship. We don't fragment off identity and culture as a separate part of the relationship. It retains the modality as it is. The modality needs to consider the wording, the language, the scope of what I'm articulating. It needs to look at um, how it sees, things like concepts of conditions of worth and or transference and so on in that context of that whole self. It's not mandatory. Sorry, it's not. It's all mandatory to do that. Okay, so that's then the easy part. Uh, Now it's just following on from that. I'm not going to go into this too much depth. So the step three is simply recognizing that the model can be used to embed in existing practices, disciplines, and knowledge. So an example of that would be to say, if we're talking about grief, for example, in a CPD setting, we would say, okay, how does a worldview of a client impact the experience of grief? How does their identity and their roles impact the experience of grief? How does their relational patterns impact it? So do you get the idea? The model itself provides a tool to consider how we're contextualizing our training, the way we talk about particular subjects and so on. And that's a process. So number four of the steps is, I just want to check out on time. So, okay, good for time. Is simply that we're building consciousness of the context. Build evidence-informed consciousness of the social, mental health, and therapeutic ecosystem and the opportunities and barriers to change within it and how it connects to personal and collective practice. In other words, simply put, student coming in by using this model will automatically referring their own ideas to understanding the social context and whether they want to participate in social change or not, and where their worldviews lie. The key thing is that we're building consciousness embedded in from day one. A quick question we will ask all things equal, can we individually and collectively serve the whole population who is advantaged and disadvantaged? So in the book, I give a number of exercises for students to use, perhaps to become conscious of where those barriers may lay in, you know, the difficulties we have around resources and inequality as well. Another part of the model is to think about the organization's practice, is that we can only develop services or practices as good as we are in terms of our proficiency, in terms of the quality of us as human beings. Just like a builder can't build, you know, a skyscraper unless they have the requisite proficiency for it. So it all starts with the organization. So, so the way I embed this into organizations is to say you've got to adopt the wholeness solution into the organization, into the bowels of the organization. You've got to develop that in your internal relationship with staff so that they're aware now how to service and provide services, whether it's in therapy practice or training or case management practice for hate crimes I'm involved with. They've got to have that embedded into the organization to do this work. And therefore, it needs to feed embedded into all the functions of the organization, whether it's marketing, HR, hiring, as well as then into the service delivery of it. Again, it's a very top tour of it, but I hope we're giving the idea that this is the foundational bit that's missing that we need to use to embed. Okay, so I'm coming towards the end, and this is where I sort of hand over the conversations really, because I think I need to ask people, have I made the case for it? I'm basically saying it can't be done without it. It's a small change I'm asking for individually. A small change I'm asking for training providers to implement. It's not sustainable without it. Social change is not sustainable without it because we're always going to come into conflict. We're always going to come into conflict without understanding. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy ride, social change, or the conversation is going to be easy or not polarizing. But we've got to have that foundational understanding before we get into conversations about that are difficult conversations, either whether it's in client practice, whether it's in student practice, in the profession, awareness of difficulties around hierarchies in the profession, exploitation, who gets what, and resources. This is also part of this change because how can we engage in those conversations without this basic fundamental understanding? So, what I see at the moment is that uh, we don't have that fully available to us to be able to explore it, to be able to say, make our own minds about what is fair and unfair in the profession. Obviously, Scoped is an example of that. Um, I'm not sure if we've all got the right baseline of understanding about things like hierarchies, consciousness, how dynamics of power and affinity work, to be able to make up our mind about what's good and what could be improved. So, what can we do individually, in community, institutionally, collectively to action this? And that's where I'm asking for help, really, because I can't do this with a few people. I really want people that have got influence. Everyone's got influence to an extent, even if it's talking to someone or emailing someone. But to get visibility and drive this change, it will require a lot of hands. I can't do this by myself. The reason I did this work was to do this. It wasn't about the book, but I felt this was a good strategy for doing it. And it's coming forward in terms of agreement on that. But I'm also understanding that to do change, someone needs to do change. I've given a solution for how training can change very easily from day one. It doesn't require much change. Just use that model, the lived experiences, and just carry that forward throughout training. That's all that needs to be done. And that will catalyze what we need to do going forward. So please do come forward if you can help.
Thank you, Mamood. That's
Oh, brilliant.
a very strong call. Really appreciate all your ideas and sharing that. So let's go straight to comments and let's start with Laura. Laura, do you want to come on camera if you can? Come off mute.
Oh,
Oh yeah, we can't
hello.
see you, but that's
No, I
okay.
know my camera seems to not be working. I've been trying to sort it all through, but it won't turn on. Sorry.
And Laura, sorry, just before you start, just say to people if you'd like to make a comment, please do put up your hand, your digital hand. There's the you can do that by raising hand on the bar at the bottom, or put a comment in the chat, and then I can read it out to Mahmood.
Um, Thank you so much. Everything you said makes so much sense. And at the moment, I am in my third year of a 4-year doctorate, and I've currently had some difficulties with the hierarchical structure of my training. And I absolutely need to think about something like this. But I guess one of the things I feel like I'm coming up against is just how difficult it can be when people are so defended that they don't feel open to seeing that they might need something like this. And um, yeah, like what you said about the harm that can be caused, there's an ignorance sometimes I find to being open to wanting to grow as if they've already got there. And yeah, I guess I absolutely want to be part of bringing this in, but as a trainee, I'm finding that when I speak to it, I end up in trouble and being seen as a disruptor. And there's issues around my competence because I raise difficult questions and people don't want to think about them. And I'm having to face the decision about how I keep myself safe in it to get to the end of my training to actually be able to influence as well. So yeah, I wanted to say thank you because I thought everything that you said made complete sense. And you're right about the simplicity, but it's got to be kind of really wanted and I guess embedded in every single person delivering it. And that's the bit that feels tricky.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura, and thanks for your question. I'm sorry to hear some of the struggles you're facing within the training course as well, and really also heartened that actually a trainee is talking about this and trying to advocate for something like this when really it shouldn't really be have to be advocated for because it's so basic and fundamental. Um, so I think I appreciate on the day to day, and I do get it as well. I will tell you story. I don't need to tell you stories now, but this is hard work for me. But to just to reconfigure the strategy here, culture is more stronger than structural and institutional power. That's where I'm coming from. The cultural shift is needed. And obviously, you could say actually you need institutions to do cultural shift, but I don't think so. I think people can shift culture because people are the culture. So the strategy, whether right or wrong, is coming from a cultural perspective. I recognize the barriers, organizations, but also recognize that if people are aware of a solution, aware of actually some simplicity around it, that the culture of 10%, 20%, 40%, and so on, that could shift into organizations as well. I do hear a lot from, I speak to hundreds of students, training providers, and it seems to be there is a sort of need, just from a basic compliance perspective, to do this from day one. It's in the Scoped framework. So how are we doing that? It says there embed context, difference, diversity throughout, including worldviews and all that stuff's in there. So I don't understand the barriers now at the moment. So I haven't got an answer for you other than to say, reach out for support, reach out to me, to us, and see how we can support you. But I'm also recognizing that you're in that frame of studying, and those could be barriers in terms of what you want to do in terms of your training course, rather than having to advocate for it as well at the same time, which is like quite a tricky one. So
Thank
I'm not sure that's answering it, but just reach out if you need support.
Thank you. And I will definitely be recommending to the EDI lead that he looks at your work. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Mahmood, can I ask you, and again, if people want to put their hands up or put anything in the chat, but just while we're waiting for some other questions, I think what I'd like to understand, I mean, what do you see as the ways of driving this forward, and what do you see as the kind of obstacles that we need to overcome
Yeah,
to make a kind of genuine difference? Is it about more text, articulating it? Is there something about changing the culture of kind of our therapy trainings?
yeah. So the strategy so far has the book is a strategy
Yeah.
which gives me visibility. It gives me a here's an answer. The model tells you the answer as well. So without that, we never really had a solution. I'm glad you mentioned it. We never, surprisingly, ever we haven't got a solution other than this at the moment. So the strategy is simply reach out to providers, start from the ground level, tutors, training providers, um, scope ed requirement. Here's that I've already given all the material for free, the models for free, the documents for free. So it requires basically, in a way, exactly what Laura has mentioned, is to tell people about it. I'm not saying that's going to just go swimmingly, but the first thing is, do you know that you need to meet this requirement? Do you know that there's a solution for it and it's quite simple and cost effective? Um, we all have influence, but task communities don't want to put you on the spot either. Mick, is that we need your buy-in to just say that this is something we need to look at. Um, it's not going to damage your existing theories or anything like that. It's just about augmenting it and making sure we don't exclude anything into consideration. So that's the strategy at the moment, but it's organic. We may have to, because people have been thinking about a more formal charitable organization or something like that. So it's organic in terms of that. So far, I'm hopeful still, but I'm not naive. We have had good uh, take up, which is that list of 20 organisations using it, individual tutors mostly. That's a great start. So that's the unless I'd be interested to know other people's ideas of how we can push for this. If we agree this is a simple, cost-effective solution and it has merit, what can we do as individually and collectively? Do you have any views on that? I'm not sure.
I mean, for me, I guess the first question that comes to Laura in a sec, but would be to identify the barriers. And I think, I guess my sense would be that one of the key barriers is how modality driven a lot of our trainings are at the moment.
Yeah,
And whilst I agree with you that the kind of model you're proposing isn't is synergetic potentially, I think that while you've got models which are very specific about, for instance, learning that certain conditions are necessary and sufficient, or this is a model of development, or kind of intrapsychically based on, for instance, psychodynamic interpretation or cognitive distortions.
Yeah,
I think that mitigate, I mean, I guess this is part of the reason why we develop pluralism is to create a space which allows for more kind of new thinking and new evidence come through. I think for courses that are, for instance, very person-centered or very psychodynamic, it's harder to incorporate that than it would be, say, for integrative courses that I think can integrate more into what they do.
yeah, yeah. I see where you're coming from. I think that will be that is going to be one of the barriers. In terms of the positioning at the moment with this, I position it as a set of requirements and scope. Does that make sense? So it's like architectural.
Yeah,
But I understand that doesn't mean the problem's going to go away. But I'm sort of saying this is mandatory. You translate it to whatever theory you want to translate it to.
yeah,
But from a embedding equity context, an EDI perspective, this is showing you the requirements for it, and this is how you can do it. But now it's up to theories to actually figure out what it means to them.
yeah,
To so I'd be interested in other people who are using it already, how they can translate it. I did have some obstacles as I talked about with you before about psychoanalytical. Um, I don't know. I think it's a bit early as well to see how the barriers will be raised. But I think you're right. I think that is going to be probably the key one. But the key ones, I guess, will be that one you're mentioning, and the other one will be getting it in front of people, because I am not a well-known person here in this profession. Who is this person who's telling me this is how we could embed? So that's another barrier. I think those two barriers are things because I think if we had the communication, we'd get a lot more percentage. But then we need to think about what it means in terms of theory and stuff like that as well. The
yeah.
barriers.
Let's
So
go to Laura. I'll come to you in a second. Let's go to Babs first. Babs, do you want to come off mute?
Hi, Mick. Thanks.
Oh yeah,
Hello, Mamood. Thank you so much for your
I
presentation. I really enjoyed it. I guess I'm sort of, I'm really interested in the model. So I am a trainer. I head up the counselling program at ESCG, and there's a few of us in the team that are quite radical, and we've been embedding a lot of anti-oppressive practice and decolonisation. Um, and I'm sort of wondering where your sort of model will fit with those kinds of ideas. And also we've been integrating Myra Khan's work as well and working within diversity. So I like the way we're sort of stepping back, if you like. So rather than looking at specific aspects of diversity, we're looking at a model that sort of incorporates everything.
everything.
I mean, how do you sort of is your book aimed at tutors, do you think?
Yeah,
Training
tutors,
providers.
students,
Yeah,
therapists,
yeah,
yes.
okay.
It's a resource. It's designed as an inter-student lecturer transparent resource.
Oh, okay,
Students have
cool.
used it so far to help them. If they get stuck in a training course, they don't know how the group process works. They can look at it and say, "Here's an alternative view." So yeah, that's a great question. I want to clarify where
Yeah,
I'm
so how
coming.
does it fit with all the other things that
Yeah,
we're
so I'll
doing?
clarify. I want to do a FAQ on that one actually. So I'll clarify that um, my model isn't even a theory; it's a truism.
Mm,
How can you argue we don't live in the planet? How can you argue that we don't have beliefs and worldviews? How can you argue we don't have a mind and body? How can you argue with that we don't live with knowledge and apply knowledge in our day
mm,
to day? So the other second point is that this is defragmentation. So I so any model, even including cultural competence, diversity, etc., is an add-on, is an additional. So this is bringing it into the whole. So the ground level whole, there's nothing wrong with having different models, by the way. I'm not saying we should
mm,
not have them. And theories and so on, we should have them. But the model is designed to maintain the whole, not to fragment. That's why I would not, if you notice the model, I would not never say things like um, diversity as a sort of central
yeah,
feature of the model because it's about normal, as you said in the diagram, it said normativity and difference at the bottom, and then it had barriers and opportunities on the right and left hand side. So it's almost like a whole model that encapsulates everything that could be considered. Yeah, so the positioning I have with decolonization is that it's compatible because it's got the knowledge bit, it's got the time bit, it's got the intergenerational bit. And so I would see it at the ground level of practice, and it's not a theory, it's a truism. Does that
Mm.
clarify it a little bit?
Yeah, so if you wanted to like focus on other things like disability justice or queer theory or something like
Yeah.
that, you
Yeah.
could incorporate that
Yeah,
alongside.
and that will be the lens for the whole model
Yeah,
will be
yeah.
looked at. So, for example, I did it recently. I did a training on neurodivergent stress and trauma. I used the model, but with the neurodivergence as a central point for the whole thing.
Mm.
So similarly,
Let's
you
go.
could, yeah,
Thanks, Mum. Let's go on to
yeah,
Laura and then Rebecca, and then we'll take a
Yes.
break.
yeah,
Oh, thank you. I'll try and be quick. I wanted to just first of all say I sort of disagree with you, Mick, in terms of that my training is psychoanalytic in its kind of positioning, but I think you're right in the sense that I think there is a culture within psychoanalytic training that might be hard to change the mindset. But in terms of my understanding of the theory, there is no
Yeah.
reason why I can't think about internal worlds and psychodynamic kind of ways of working without this being at the root of it too. And I think that's the frustrations I'm having, as though, it's not one or the other. If we think holistically about human beings and all of the things that are in your model, Mamood, I think you can then apply any type of thinking with it. So, I think the barriers are in people's attitudes and defenses to learning than rather than the actual modalities. The other thing I just wanted to say was this feels really relevant for academia in general, education, and also around management and supervision, because working in the NHS, the level of hierarchy and lack of seeing people as individual people with all these different experiences and knowledge and everything you've said causes so many issues around staff retention and sickness. And I think it could be really fundamentally huge if we can get it out there and understood. So I just wondered if I can contact you after this at some point, because I think, yeah.
definitely, definitely, yes. I think some will, I'm pragmatic. Some people will come along. Some schools will come along. Um, some training providers will come along. We'll just see how it goes with that.
Thanks, Mum. Let's go to Rebecca, and then we'll take a break.
Yeah, thanks, Mahmood. That was really interesting, and I'm really intrigued. I'm a trainer myself, and so I'm sort of kind of sitting there going, okay, how can we embed this? Because I've been thinking about trying to develop a module for the course, which is on context and EDI. But now I'm thinking, it's not a separate module, it's embedding this in all the modules, right?
Yeah,
But actually, like I came into this work originally from a social anthropological perspective rather than a psychology one. And that's what it feels like to me suddenly. Like we're thinking about helping and we're thinking about therapy from an anthropological position rather than a psychological one. And to me, I start feeling quite excited about that because it is looking at context and it is looking at culture and it is looking at how all these things shape us rather than making these assumptions that we
yeah,
make in psychology that these things are secondary. So I
yeah,
love that. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
I'm glad. That's very good. Thank you very much for that. Any help you need, just reach out.
Um,
Um, Again, I want to reinforce the pedagogy. It's simple. It's introduced the model day one, getting people to reflect on it. You don't even need to teach it after that. All you just need to do is reflect on it. I think I don't know if I'm going to put anyone on the spot here, but I think some people are here from training providers. They can attest to that. So we can put you in touch with other people as well that are doing it in a very simple way. We're not asking for new modules. We're just simply saying use it as a reference point for yourself and students and all that stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mamood. It's so exciting.